Thank you. Well, it's nice to be here, and thank you all for coming. My name's Mark, and I work at Microsoft. We're a small software company. Perhaps you've heard of us. Yeah, in particular, I think one of the other things is that I'm probably one of the few people at this conference who doesn't belong to a marketing group. I work in the community online and support team. If you were at Dawn's presentation a little earlier today, she talked a little bit about the MVP program, the community of influencers. We're probably best known for that. We're going to have a summit soon in the company, and we'll have 4,000 people showing up. So I work in that group that has a great affinity towards and connection with community itself, right? So today I'm going to really talk about some of the innovation and some of the work that we've done to be able to advance that discussion about how you get from metrics to action, and how you can start to go to people who control budgets and who control your ability to really affect change within your companies, and how you can use social media, this new phenomena, this incredible voice that's out there of millions and hundreds of millions of people, how you can use that in very concrete ways, okay? So today we're going to talk about social media listening, and I want to introduce you to this concept of listening as opposed to a couple of other things that we've heard very often within the context of social media, how and why you should do that, and then really talk about some the framework that we developed, and I'll give you some real concrete examples of how this has helped us, right? So I want to make this a little interactive in that, if I profess to be listening, I should be listening. You are my customers today. So if you have a Twitter account and you want to be able to tweet something about what you're hearing and thinking, use the hashtag Big ROI. And I would like to also take a few seconds to introduce Alice Fowler over here in front, who will be monitoring any of that. And if she has some really, really nice, juicy ones, she'll probably get my attention and we'll address it. So I want this really to be an interactive space, okay? So if everybody's got their lunch settled down, let's try to move. So, show of hands. How many of you would say that you listen to social media today? A couple of hesitants, but okay, about half of them. How many of you say you monitor social media? Kind of the same number. Now, if you are confused, that was a little intentional. And this is kind of the key to what we're going to be doing today. There's a real difference that we found between monitoring something and really listening to something. A lot of people say they profess to be listening, but I'm not so sure that they are, okay? I'll give you a quick example. Say you were putting together a party, a Christmas party, insert whatever traditional party you do over there, right? And you invited a bunch of people over, and the party was going on successfully. Now, if you were monitoring them, so that is equal to the social media space, right? A bunch of people in kind of in a loose social setting, talking about stuff in a location where you can kind of get to, and the party. So in the monitoring sense, what you do is you would be saying things like, they all showed up on time, or what was the progression of the number of people showing up, trending from the time you asked them to come till the time they left. What was the mix of the women to the men? What were the, you get it, right? How many of them were happy? How many of them decided not to be happy in some way, shape, or form, right? That is social media monitoring. It's sentiment, reach, followers. I'm not going to talk about that stuff because there are lots of people who do that very well, very necessary. I'm not knocking it. There's a place and time for it. But today what I want to show is that if you move and if you shift your way of thinking and if you shift the framework of your references and you really start to listen, then you can really start to create some killer presentations to your board or CEO or whoever it is. Okay? Because in the listening space, what would happen is you would be saying things like, I was listening to that group of people over there, and they were really seemed happy, but they were complaining that the coffee was too cold, or that somebody over here didn't respect somebody, whatever, right? It's the essence of what the conversation is. It's not the statistics and data. Okay? So that's kind of the difference between listening and monitoring. And I like this. This definition of listening. It's taken from the Advertising Research Foundation book. And it really talks about the naturally occurring conversations, behaviors, and signals. Very, very key. Okay, so hang on to a couple of those phrases. Naturally occurring, no bias. That's what it actually means. Behaviors and signals. It's not about the numbers. It's about the behaviors and what you can learn from it. Okay, so if I were to tell you, by the end of today, if I gave you a list of things of how to do this with tools, reports, people, locations, you need to go to this list of people and listen to them, or you need to go to these sites and check them out, and you had a whole bunch of scorecards and data, how many of you would say, yes, this is exactly what I want, this is listening at its best? Very good, thank you, you're listening to me. Okay, because what I would suggest to you is that you shift your focus from that to this, where you're really talking not about tools and data flow, you're really talking about information value. You're talking about how do I make this actionable, okay? One of the key things that we learned also was that you have to listen to the right people at the right time, okay? So it doesn't make sense for me today to listen to people who have feedback about Windows XP. Okay? There are lots and lots of conversations about Windows XP. But if I'm at the point of my life cycle where I'm trying to develop and build Windows 8, I can use some of those insights, but it's probably not the right thing for me to be listening to. It's a very key component of being able to listen and get real return of investment, okay? So, in summary is basically you have to be able to get the right information. It has to be actionable, right? You have to think differently in terms of the data that you're collecting, right? We talked about the right time and to follow the conversation. This is one of the things that we've done very well with both the MVP program, which is a very vertical, superb vertical information. MVPs, if you don't know, are community people in the technical communities who just have a passion for technology and for helping others. They don't work for Microsoft. They have no, we have no contractual, you do this for us and we do this for them. These are people, and they range from grandmothers to young kids, literally, right across the globe, who take it upon themselves to just get involved with this technology, technical communities, and we enable that with awards and with connections to the product groups. So there's this very strong ability to go out and talk to the right people at the right time, but we've also developing this very broad voice of community listening intelligence framework that listens to hundreds of millions of blogs and oodles and oodles of Twitter conversations, news channels, and comments, right? Forums in the technical forum community. So this is the problem, right? Where you had companies that were working sometimes in isolation, right? Where you knew where your customers are. You knew what they were going to say predictably, right? This is what is happened. Social has changed everything, right? There's some interesting little tidbits of information that I got for you. Did you know that, according to csjconferences.org, social media has overtaken, the social media activity has overtaken porn as the #1 activity on the internet? Now, if you think, get past the chuckle factor, right? And if you think about it, that is astonishing, at least to me, right? 1 in 8 couples meet and get married now because of the online space. There are hundreds of millions. I took this was 200 million blogs. I'm sure it's upwards of 450, 500 million blogs right now. 50% of those people who are blogging and tweeting do this every day. Right? It gives you the scope and the magnitude of what this is. Right? And so it further gets complicated when you think that each one of these people are connected to each other by numbers of technologies that are increasing every single day. Right? And we have this problem where you think about it and you say, well, I created community and I have 5,000 followers and they talk to me and the problem is that that's breaking down too. That framework is shifting now, right? Where you have, in the case of Microsoft, for example, we had support centers and we had forums and we had places where people went to get help and to engage in our product groups. And what we found is that over the past couple of years, that volume has slowly decreased, right? So we've gone from like a fully assisted support place to this place where anybody, anywhere can be connected to anyone and ask anything, right? I mean, there's a statistic that says that it took 38 years for radio to reach 50 million users. Okay, so 50 million users. Radio, it took 38 years for it to be adopted. Took TV 13 years to get to that number. Right? It took the internet 4 years to get there. Guess how long it took Facebook to reach that? 5 months. Right? So you start to think about what this reservoir of knowledge and intelligence contains. And here's the beautiful part about this. It never goes away. It's always there. So if I really, really wanted to do a research project on XP, I could probably go back and do it because those conversations are not going anywhere. Now, the flip side to that is it's really, any of you know who Michael Smith was? The producer guy? So there was this gentleman who's had a large following in social media. He was, I think he was a producer. And he gets onto one of the airlines, which I shall not mention. And this gentleman was well built, shall we say. And he had an awful experience on the thing. I mean, within minutes, he got out and he started tweeting. His tweets were picked up and it were retweeted. And before long, I mean, literally within hours, the CEO of the airline company had some memo pushed onto his desk that said, "We've got a problem." And he was like, where the hell did this come from? Welcome to the world of social media, right? And you got to be listening to this thing because otherwise, if you don't, you're going to get stung by this. Okay? So your customers are talking about you. Whether you like it or not, be part of the conversation or be out of the conversation. In our space, in the Microsoft space, there's, we've got all of these properties right now. There are hundreds of thousands of places where people can go and talk about our products and services. We need to be listening. That's what we're doing right now. I'll show you how in a few minutes. And hopefully by now, and show of hands if you do think I haven't, that your real problem is not data. It's not tools. It's not dashboards. It's not vendors who can give you services. God bless them for doing that, but that's one part of the equation. You have to take it to that next step. So let's talk about how do we do that? What does that mean? What does that entail? Okay. So when I started to do this about 2 years ago, I really started to think about what was my problem space, right? And that's one of the things that I would encourage you to do is to, if you want to get into the listening intelligence business, start not from tools and what you can do, start from what you want to do and what you need to do. Okay, what is it that you're trying to do at the end of the day? And if you think about social media listening intelligence, there are 4 dimensions, and I'll talk very briefly about this. The first one is marketing. I mean, most of you probably know a lot about this, right? You want to go effectiveness, reach, you do campaigns, you get followers, you want to measure your brand sentiment. So that's kind of one way of listening to market intelligence information, right? The second one is engagement, where that's a lot of what we do, right? Where you find influencers, you get influencer programs created, And you go out and you engage with these folks, and you really think about your NSAT and PSAT and all these acronyms for survey, metrics, and data. Willingness to, those are the kind of metrics that you drive to be able to understand, am I succeeding or am I not, okay? Then there's, of course, the communication piece of it, where you can set up social media engagement to be able to let your folks, your community know, what, when, how. Hey, we've got a tweet up next door. You know all about Foursquare and Groupon and all these sites that allow you to really communicate your value, your company's value, right? And the third one is what the business that I'm in, which is listening, where you really want to focus broadly. You don't want to be tied down to any one particular place, person, venue. You want to be able to listen really broadly. There are many, many tools who will let you do that, okay? Will allow you to get the data, right? And then once you get the data, then of course you have to take it to the next step, and we'll talk about that. And there's some interesting things that we've learned over the past few months of doing this, is that you can really start to gauge what the customer experience really is. It's not what you think it is. It's not what you hope it to be. It is what it really is. It is what the conversation is, right? And that's really some really key insights that you will be able to get to be able to affect what your business does next or how it's doing things currently. So here's my question to you, right? What are you involved in? If you're in marketing, then think about your marketing metrics, the way that you're doing it. But don't call it listening, because that's not necessarily what you're in. If you want to get into the listening intelligence and really generate some insights and action, you got to concentrate on the listening part over there. Okay? Okay, so let me just take a few minutes to kind of set the framework for how we design this, and then we can move on over here. So if you think about effectiveness, social media effectiveness, right, you're really talking about how much, how many. We've talked about this, right? What is the sentiment number? How much is it increasing? What's the trend line look like? And then what happens is you get people talking about your data or talking about the things that you do in this format. Our price reduction, blah, 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 was at a certain level, or our participation grew in X percentage amount, right? That's the kind of, that's what you will hear from people who are using your information data. Sound familiar? Yeah? But if you move to the social media intelligence track, if you really want to think about social media as a reservoir for intelligence, okay, then the conversation will change within your company from, it helps us keep pulse of how many customers are using information. I use it in my triage every week. You also get people, when you say, I'm sorry, we have to kind of stop this and restart something else. But we'll continue to do that. I had one person actually say this to me. They said, oh my God, thank you. I thought you were shutting it down. You almost gave me a heart attack. That shows that the information that you're actually providing to someone is really valuable to what they do, right? And that's what listening intelligence does, because listening intelligence essentially, at its core, at its underlying need, is to be able to gain those insights. So, have you seen these before? You've all seen these before. I bet you have, right? Is what I call digital bricks, right? And I see a lot of smiling faces around here. And the way that you try to, try to combat this is to ask the question, simple question, so what? So someone gives you a number, right? And you say, okay, so what? Well, our reach has increased, blah, blah, blah. So what? Well, it's allowed us to be able to send X number of messages out per week. So what? Well, and if you can't answer that with a specific metric tied to return on your investment, if it's costing you $20,000 to run that campaign and you can't explain why you're spending that $20,000 on that campaign, you probably should rethink why you're running that campaign. I'm not saying don't run it. I'm saying figure out what you're trying to do. Because if all you're trying to do get is metrics, I guess that's all you're going to try to get. Okay, so let's really talk now a little more practical about what and how we did this. I talked a little bit about this from the start. Your first strategy, I strongly recommend, is to forget about the tools, forget about all the other stuff that you naturally gravitate towards to try to solve a problem, and go to the root cause of what you are trying to do. What is your strategy, right? Start with the end. Don't start with the present. Start with the end. Excuse me. And also think about this needs versus wants thing. I wrote a little bit about this in my blog. But if you think about it, right, you don't need data. I'm sorry, yeah? You don't need data, you want information. So every time you think about something, think about it from a needs and a wants perspective, right? From our perspective, the reason why we started all of this was, remember going back to the original, there's this huge move towards social media and there's hundreds of millions of conversations going on. Our basic need was that when we went back to the product group with information of how we needed and what we needed to do from a support perspective, we found that we were lacking data all of a sudden. Why? Because they were not coming to us anymore. They were not picking up the phone. They were not making calls. They were not, hey, contact us as much, right? So we had only half the story. So the basic need that we had was, hey, where's this missing story? What is the missing data that we have? Why can't we listen to what our customers are saying anymore? A little bit of research showed that, while you have a lot of information online now, and less people coming over here because they can go and ask a question or get support or information in multiple language, 24 hours, 24/7, from people who they may know or trust. Right? And that's the other incredible thing about this. One of the things that we found was, if you think about social media as a global phenomenon, right? I get asked very often, well, you're listening to social media for Windows Phone, as an example. What are the insights that we're learning about Windows Phone? Can you do it for the Europe, Middle East, Asia region? Or can you do it for the Asia Pacific region? And we did a little bit of study to look at Windows 7 conversations over a period of time. And then we had a bunch of insights. What do those conversations mean? We went back in time to the exact time that we gathered those insights from and looked at different languages. Okay, German, French, Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, a couple of other languages, right? I had a bet with Alice. I said, you're going to find about a 40% match, right, in the teams, in those languages in your teams. Yeah. Anyone want to guess what match we had? My body language should tell you something. Sorry? Yeah, it was very high. It was a little bit over 70%. A 70% match of conversations in Chinese about Windows 7 as they were in English and Windows 7. But the more we looked at it, it kind of made sense, right? And it made sense for a simple reason. It made sense for the reason that there were people in China who could speak English, A. Their experiences were kind of the same with our products, mostly the same. There are some differences. I will give you that, right? And if I was in another country and I had a problem, wouldn't I want to go to a place where there were a maximum number of people who could help me? And that's global English. So by proxy, what happens is it really becomes quite simple. You really have to listen to global English. Okay, and I stress that word because you don't want to listen again to one location or a number of people. You have to listen broadly. All right, and like I said, there are many tools that will do that. But once you do that, you have a global result. You can apply it to every single region, right? So start with the strategy of ends and wants, and needs. Sorry. Develop a plan. Okay, you got to have goals. Like I said, get clear about what you are listening for and what you're trying to affect and change. Okay? See who your audience is. Assign roles and responsibilities. Get people to hold themselves accountable for this. Otherwise, you are producing digital bricks again. There are things that you hand out during presentations, handouts during presentations, and, oh, this is great, and it's You don't know what happens to it after that, right? Get into a rhythm. This is one of the things, a really great learning that we had. Get consistent, get predictable, build trust. It takes time, okay? Now, we're a small software company, and we have the resources to be able to do this. We listen to about 20 products right now with a team of about 5 people, right? But you scale it to whatever you need to do. It doesn't have to be, if you're a $1 billion company, put some muscle behind it. You're going to have to do that. If you're a small shop, well, you can be smart about it. Okay? There's lots of free online tools, and there's lots of information you can find. I talked about this, the intelligence, right? Right information at the right time from the right source, right? And the right source basically means you don't want to be, remember our party room? You don't want to be going to that one person who's sitting in the corner sulking about whether the temperature is too low in the room or not, okay? That's an indicator. You don't want to discount that. That's an indicator. But maybe you go to the other groups and see whether people are wearing coats or not. I don't know, right? So right information, right time, right source. Very, very important to key it to your life cycle. Don't collect information that is interesting but ultimately useless, right? And then, what is the goal? In our case, it's about changing perception. It's about being able to get insights that are actionable, send it to the right people at the right time, hold them accountable, and change that customer experience online. Okay? So underlying all of this is, I want to stress that there's no one thing that you can do. There's no one tool. There's no one button that you can push this out to. It's going to take people. It's going to take time. It's going to take dedication. It's going to take resources and effort. It's going to take a commitment. Okay? This is not something that you can just turn on tomorrow morning. You have to do a bit of planning and get the ball moving further down the road. One of the things that I constantly run into is when I do this, when I provide this information across Microsoft, I often get asked, what's the tool that you're using? What's the process that you're using? And my response very often is, I can tell you what the tools are, I can tell you what the processes are. At the end of the day, I want to ask you why you want to do that, because your job is not to be an analyst, okay? And that's one of the key things that we also we recognized is that you can give people data they say they want at the time they want, but they may not be able to use it because all you're doing is giving them data. And after the initial, oh, I'm so excited, after they get over that phase, then what will happen is like, there's no reproduction case here, I'm sorry, I can't use this. What? How many guys were using it? We're talking about this. Yeah, I don't know why. So all of a sudden you go, why aren't you using my data? Well, the reason is that they're not analysts, right? People they have different jobs. Let them do their job as subject matter experts. And I'll show you, one of those instances that we talked about. This is basically, I've interwoven what this slide means. This is how we did it. We wanted to get the rest of the story. We wanted to put it into commitments and for the folks who are actually getting the information. There's no bull. There are some hard messages, let me put it, that we have provided to some groups because the customer conversation is what it is. We're not going to sugarcoat it. We're not going to change it. I have no pony in the show to try to tell you something that I'm not hearing or change. The conversation is what it is, and then when you get to that point, then it becomes very actionable. This is an example of one of the reports that we put out. You can see that it's very easy to use. Again, make it consumable, provide samples, build trust, okay, by giving scores. There's information for different customers to use for different reasons. So if someone who's running global analytics can see where the conversation for that time period is happening. So if you notice that this SharePoint report is for the week of June 7th to the 13th. Okay, it's just 1 week. It's very specific for that time, very actionable. Okay, and I just want to run through two quick examples of this, of how to change the way that you think about metrics itself. So here's a story that started off in the Windows 7 space. In March, we were talking about, we found out that there were lots of conversations about what does this new browser choice mean, and there's some regulations in Europe about this, right? Now, the interesting thing is that your customer is also not going to tell you what to do. This is often what happens when you say, tell me what I need to do to be able to make the change. And this is where the analytics for the intelligence comes into play. You have to be able to interpret, connect the dots between the conversations. That's why you need dedicated people who are analysts, who know how to do this, okay? This team over there figured out that this was a problem, and they created this knowledge base of information relative to this topic and posted it proactively, okay? And what we found was you tracked it is that this version of content went to the #1 spot. There was a 77% relevancy of people saying that, oh, I really like this, 4,000 views, okay? And you go, yes, that was success, listening success. But I want to submit to you that this is monitoring. You're monitoring numbers, okay? You got to take it to that next step, right? Now, if you do it, and this is the next step, if you interpret what 4,000 views actually means to your business, then you can start to come up with numbers, actual numbers. And in this case, this was tens of thousands of dollars that we saved by doing this proactively, right? I mean, I'll give you another example. Let's suppose that you had, you were creating a media campaign, you're somebody who created a media campaign, and you had 5,000 followers, or Twitter followers, right? And you go, oh, that's my measurement of success. Now I can talk to them better, and I can send information out, right? What if you applied listening intelligence capabilities to that data stream, right? And you found out, and I'm kind of hypothetically making this up, but I can just to prove a point, is if you took 5,000 people and you say, well, 1% of my whole user base, and you have to take really small numbers of this when it's social media because it's so large, right? You say, okay, I take 1% of that of my whole subscriber base, 50,000 people are online, but I'm hearing that there's a 30% of them are talking about, if you only did this, we would upgrade sooner, or we would buy something differently, right? Now, if you have that intelligence, and you make a further assumption that only, of those 50,000 people, a bunch of them are just talking, right? And you land up with some small number, and 750 people who, if you just change this thing, you now got a sale of $100. You've now effectively made that leap to saying, I had $5,000 to now I've got a $75,000 return on my investment. Okay. Now, if your marketing campaign cost $25,000, you still made $50,000 on that return on investment. Which presentation would you rather give your board of directors or your manager or your thing? I had 5,000 followers, or I got a lot of this. So, if you do this right, this is the kind of quotation that you want back. I'm the group manager for team, and this report feels on my Wall Street Journal. That is where you say, okay, now I'm really starting to build return on my investment. Okay, so to wrap it up quickly, start with the end. Think about what your listening dimensions are: marketing, communication, engagement, listening. Okay, tie them all together. Are you building value or bricks? What if, so what? Ask that question, okay? And focus on the customer experience, not the data. That customer experience is what you're really after. That will get you where you need to go. Okay, so we've got about 5 minutes left. Questions? Yes?
Have you found any major differences between the data you get from listening to social media versus the contact center versus maybe rolling voice of the customer, outbound survey data you get? So yes. Is there something about the people who are vocalizing themselves on social media that's different from people calling into the customer?
It would depend, on your business. It would depend upon the kind of call center that you have. In our case, for example, you wouldn't get somebody like Boeing who has, X thousands of seats of, Windows licenses sitting down and writing social media stuff, right? That you would probably have, that kind of intelligence is for other kinds of channels, right? I mean, you have technical account managers, you have different processes for that kind of information. But if that's not what you're in, right? If you're not such a big business, then yes, you will find other insights. Because here's the thing. It's not, you don't go looking for things that people are telling you to fix. That's kind of the trip, you can trip on that very quickly. People will talk about their experiences within their own context. And analysts really have to understand the business to be able to connect the dots between the conversations. We found a recall class bug in Office just by listening to social media, right? And you think about it, Office went through a beta testing program, it went through rigorous testing, but at the end of the day, somehow everybody missed it to the point where you had a number of people talking about an experience that a subject matter expert would then say, oh my goodness, this is what this means. They're talking about this widget, but really the real problem lies over here because that's why the widget is failing, right? And that's your investment that you need to put into this listening intelligence framework. Okay, it's not a cookie cutter thing, honestly, to be really honest and frank about it. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned you have 5 people listening to 20 product questions, and can you tell us more a little bit on how these 5 people fit into the entire corporate CRM structure?
Oh, yeah, good question. So the output from this team, the small team, right, goes to thousands of people across Microsoft. It's a publication that anyone at Microsoft can pick up. We started about a year ago with, I think it was 8 or 9 people, and it's just virally spread that way. Right? It's another indication of whether you're really adding value to your company. But anyway, so the way that we rely upon it is you say, look, I tell the story. I can absolutely guarantee to you that these are the topics of conversation. These are the themes. These are the things that are most concerning or your customers are talking about. Now, your responsibility on the other side, in the product group or in the company, is for those subject matter experts. Remember I talked about getting accountability? So work with teams, get strategic partnerships, get people to say, look, if I give you this, what are you going to do with it, right? And how often can you return back to me and tell me what you're doing with it? Because at the end of the day, I've got to demonstrate what has been done. So the stories that I've been able to tell you have actually come from people who have written back to me and said, hey, here's how we did this, and here's what we changed. So that's the way you have to do it.